What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support me, you can now follow me on Patreon. Not only is it the best way to help out the channel, additionally you'll get more say in what decks I cover. Special shout out to all of you high contributing patrons. Newsome, you rock. Additionally, you can always use that TCGplayer link in the description down below, or as always just liking, commenting, subscribing also helps out the channel. Now let's get into today's Deck Tech with Pako and Haldan. And guys, I've been banging my head up against this deck for about a month now, getting it to where I'm happy with it, and I finally am. The goal of this deck is to push these two farther into the cEDH meta by adding some new lines that hopefully complement them more than the lines that are already in the deck. We're also doing a couple different things I don't see a lot of the top lists doing, like adding Stax pieces. Guys, this is not the fastest deck in the meta. Our goal is simple. We want to outvalue our opponents with Pako and Haldan. So we're going to kill one player for sure with Paco, and then once we've generated a ton of cards, we can use Hdan to outvalue the other two opponents. There's also a lot of new lines we're adding to this deck. Some of them are some casual cards you guys probably haven't seen in a while or haven't seen at all in cEDH, but bear with me, I will defend them and hopefully, sway you into throwing them into some of your decks. So, if you want to see some new lines, you want to kill some people with Paco and Haldan, let's get into the deck tech. Let's kick it off by talking about how this deck wins. The first thing we're going to need is Sword of Feast and Famine and the Reaver Cleaver. Then we can go infinite using Aggravated Assault. We do need to be able to generate at least 5 mana with our lands, which we can do that with less than 5 lands if we have the right lands on the battlefield. And as far as the Reaver Cleaver goes, that thing gets equipped and we can basically go infinite right away. Paco gets massive fast, and this is giving him a +1/+1, not to mention trample. So, like I said, connecting with Paco is not going to be a problem if your opponents don't have any removal there. You're just going to win the game. Not to mention both of these pieces, Sword of Feast and Famine and the Reaver Cleaver, are going to make it to where you can have your cake and eat it too. You're going to be able to cast spells from your hand, furthering your strategy, while also keeping your counter magic open because you're going to have all that open mana. So now, this is where we start outvaluing our opponents. We're also going to use Seize the Day here. Now, this card's pretty interesting if we have the Reaver Cleaver or Sword of Feast and Famine on the battlefield, because it basically reads draw 8 cards and then kill an opponent, so I definitely thought it was worth it here. For our next winning lines, we're going to take a look at Isochron Scepter. There are 3 different cards in the deck we can imprint with Isochron Scepter to go infinite and win the game. For our first line, we're going to imprint it with either Noxious Revival or Reclaim. Then we're going to need access to at least 7 mana. Notably, that's just total mana. We don't have to just use lands to generate that, so your Mana Crypts and Soul Rings are going to be fine here, because we are going to be taking infinite extra turns using Temporal Manipulation and Time Warp. Now, we can go ahead and attack with Paco, use a Reclaim or Noxious Revival effect to throw those on top of our library, and then again, as long as we have the 5 mana after we activate our Isochron Scepter to put that card back on top of our library, we can just take an extra turn, and then we can do that infinitely as long as we can consistently generate 7 mana. If you think generating 7 mana is insane, the lines before this using Seasons Past needed an absurd amount of mana to generate infinite extra turns, so this is for sure an improvement. I want to take this time to talk about an old combo we're going to be throwing back in this deck that kind of fell out of the meta: Isochron Scepter and Dramatic Reversal. Now, I think the reason this one fell out of favor is mostly because you need an infinite mana outlet in the command zone, and even then sometimes it doesn't win you the game on the spot. Why I think this can re-enter the meta now is literally every single deck now is running the One Ring. So now, not only with the Dramatic Reversal combo do we have a way to generate infinite mana, we also have a way to untap the One Ring an infinite amount of times. This can effectively draw our library and we'll have infinite mana. So I think this is definitely a good enough reason to include the Dramatic Reversal combo here, since we do run the One Ring. Not to mention we do have a fair amount of artifact tutors in the deck. Now that we can draw our deck, what's the win con? Well, we have the previous win con. Since you can draw your deck and you have infinite mana, generating infinite combat steps not going to be hard with Aggravated Assault, but you can always go for the classic Underworld Breach, Brain Freeze, Lion's Eye Diamond line. Now, this is going to be really solid in the deck since, again, all of these are non-creatures, so if we exile any of them, it's going to be fine. It's also a solid way to win with Intuition, right? Now, we will tutor all 3 of these up, and they're probably either going to give you Brain Freeze or Lion's Eye Diamond. Hopefully, they give you the Diamond, because if they do, we will already have a Noxious Revival or Reclaim in hand. You really don't want to cast Intuition without that, because you can't really go for the win unless you have a way to get get your Underworld Breach back from the graveyard. So you're gonna do something like this. If they give you the diamond, you're kind of happy. You cast the diamond, you use Noxious Revival to put Underworld Breach on top of your library, Paco gets it for you, you crack the diamond, you can now cast Underworld Breach, and now you discard your hand, so now you have Brain Freeze, Lion Eye Diamond, and Underworld Breach on the battlefield. You can easily win the game from there. All you'll need to do is generate a huge storm count with Lion's Eye Diamond, using the Brain Freeze to put a lot of cards in your library. Then all you have to do is mill out all of your opponents with Brain Freeze. Last but not least, we do run Wheel of Fortune to kill everybody. In short, the deck wants to win in one of three ways. We either want to generate infinite combat steps, we either want to generate infinite mana and draw our deck with the One Ring and Dramatic Reversal, we can generate infinite turns using Dramatic Reversal, a Reclaim effect, and an extra turn spell, and then last but not least, we have the classic Underworld Breach line. Notably, Intuition can tutor all of these up. It just depends on how many pieces you have on the board, what you have in your hand, and how much mana you have access to. Moving on past the win cons, the next thing we need to make sure we're doing is getting Paco out as soon as turn 1 or 2. Mana Vault, Jeweled Lotus, Grim Monolith, these are going to be amazing tools to get him out as fast as possible. I have also been pleasantly surprised by Exploration. Not only does this continue to generate consistent value, getting us to that 5 land count very quickly, because again, we can play our opponent's lands with this, it's also very good at getting Paco out early, especially if you have 3 lands in your opener. It can turn an easy ship into a snap keep. Ancient Tomb, Mana Crypt, City of Traders, all very useful cards to get us to our Paco fast. Notably, City of Traders, you want this to be probably the 4th land you play, unless it easily catapults you into a turn 1, turn 2 Paco. Wild Growth and Utopia Spiral, again, way better than Mana Dorks in this deck because they're not creatures. They still give us value even if we exile them with Pako or Haldan. Gemstone Caverns is super busted in the deck. It's busted in every deck. Chrome Mox and Mox Diamond can also help us get there. We also do have Elvish Spirit Guide, Simian Spirit Guide, and Lotus Petal. Carpet of Flowers is also going to make an appearance here. Not to mention we are running Nature's Lore and 3 Visits. Instead of Signets or Talismans, I thought it'd be better to run these. One, it's going to get us to 5 lands faster. Lands are generally just better than Mana Rocks in general. I know it does kind of hurt our Dramatic Reversal combo, but I think we're running enough rocks as is for that. Also, remember, we will be getting a couple rocks off of our opponents with all of those Pako and Haldan triggers. Moving on, I want to touch on the Stax pieces we're going to run. We have Tangle Wire and Static Orb. Now, notably, you do want to use these after Paco has already hit the board. Then we're going to tap down everything on our opponent's side while hitting them in the face. This is going to generate us a ton of value over the course of 3 turns, and then by the time Tangle Wire has worn off or they get out from under the Static Orb, we will have generated so much value it's not going to matter. We can win the game from there. Cursed Totem is going to easily take care of all of the activated ability shenanigans. No more Magda, no more Thrasios, no more Cannon, Savala. A lot of these strategies are going to get screwed. Torpor Orb is also going to be solid. We're not using Thassa's Oracle to win, we're not using Dockside to win, so hating out the most common win cons is going to be huge. Last but not least, we're going to shove in Stranglehold, because hey, if you run out of your tutors, you don't have any of your value engines set up, the deck is just going to dirtle, and that's what we want. Moving on, we're going to start by talking about the pieces that protect Paco, then we're going to move on to all of our interaction. We do run Winged Boots here. It's super solid, no one's going to pay that ward cost, and it does give him a form of evasion. Canopy Cover can be a solid 2 mana, pseudo unblockable, and additionally he can't be the target of our opponent's spells, so that's going to make him a threat for the good portion of the game, and they're going to have to deal with you or just die. Veil of Summer, a solid card to not only protect your win, but also prevent Paco from being removed. Fierce Guardian and Deflecting Swat, very versatile, but can also protect Paco. Then we have Force of Will, Force of Negation, Mental Misstep, Pact of Negation, all the usual suspects. Flusterstorm. We do get to run Stubborn Denial, kind of a new one you don't get to run with a lot of decks, but in this deck it's perfect. Red Elemental Blast, Spell Pierce, Mana Drain. I really like Mana Drain here because in a scenario where you have the Reaver Cleaver in your hand, it does take quite a bit to equip that to Paco, so having a Mana Drain go off, giving us a lot of mana, can make that really easy. Mindbreak Trap, super easy for stopping the wins early and just people from storming off. Adawara and Beseju Who Endures, just solid lands that have a ton of utility. Cyclonic Rift can be very useful in this deck, especially with our ability to generate a ton of mana. Lightning Bolt, Shatter Skull Smashing, and Abrade can get rid of those hate bearers, such as Draenith Magistrate that just screws over our strategy completely. March of Swirling Mists. This one's kind of sneaky. Not only can we use this to protect Paco, we can also use it to phase out a Draenith Magistrate. That way it'll come back into play to hose over our opponents after we've gotten value. But honestly, in the scenario where you're casting this, you're kind of trying to win that turn. Vandal Blast is something I don't see a lot of people running, but honestly, it feels so good to cast this for 5 mana and then just get rid of all the mana rocks. This is going to screw over dockside players while additionally leaving your artifacts untouched. It can also just punish opponents who kept a hand that's 90% mana rocks and a land. Meddle the Mixture is 9 times out of 10 going to be used to get something like a Dramatic Reversal, Isochron Scepter, Underworld Breach, but in a pinch, it can be a solid counterspell that's going to be very useful. Moving on, let's talk about the miscellaneous stuff, the tutors, the card draw engines, and just the cards I included because I think they're good. Dockside Extortionist. Wow, Dockside Extortionist is good, guys, right? Controversial, but honestly, this can ramp us into our Paco super early, so hey, if you've got it, use it. You could say it's a Namba with Torpor Orb, but 100% I'd rather turn their strategies off than have access to the dockside. Obviously, Sylvan Library, Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora, the card draw engines of choice, these are really solid and can draw us into our win pretty fast. Time Twister is not only solid graveyard hate, but sometimes this deck can have a tendency to cast Paco turn 2 and then not have any cards in hand. So we really do need a way to go from 0 cards in hand to a full grip, and this can do that. Wheel of Misfortune, kind of the same thing. Now, I know it does draw our opponents into cards as well, but it's either that or do nothing, so you'd rather have the risk of them drawing into the win. That way you just don't sit there and do nothing, if that makes sense. Personal Tutor is going to be solid. Mystical Tutor, Gamble, Spellseeker, all of these can get us into the cards that win us the game. Transmute Artifact is very flexible. It can get the One Ring, it can get Sword of Feast and Famine, it can get the Reaver Cleaver. This thing can grab our Isochron Scepter. Like I said, it's super flexible, and the fact that we can sacrifice something useless like a Mana Vault or a Grim Monolith, and it puts the card we tutored for directly onto the battlefield is kind of massive here. Goblin Engineer, same thing, right? This can not only net us our Lion Eye Diamond, it can also net us our Sword of Feast and Famine, our Reaver Cleaver. It can even grab us the One Ring. Now it can't reanimate that, but getting the One Ring in our graveyard and using something like a Reclaim or a Noxious Revival is going to be solid as well. Steel Enchantment is just kind of funny to me, right? It's basically another value engine in the deck. We can grab a Smothering Tithe, a Mystic Remora, a Rhystic Study. Notably, not only does it count as removal, but it is kind of just another value engine because you're always going to use it on a value engine. Notably, you probably don't want to grab a Mystic Remora with this, but definitely the Rhystic Studies and Smothering Tithes, this is going to be amazing. You could even grab a Necropotence, because why not? That's going to do it for the deck tech, guys. If you're enjoying the cEDH combat, I did do an Elevere cEDH deck if you want to check that out. Also, let me know how you're enjoying the cEDH combat. It's something I'm dipping my toes into, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank my patrons. I couldn't do it without you guys. You guys are awesome. As always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.